So before what I call the post-wall era, we had what the historian Tony Judt called the post-war era. Europe, which had been the geopolitical power center of the world for at least a century, from 1815 to 1914, tore itself apart in what has been called the European Civil War, or what Winston Churchill called a new 30 Years' War between 1914 and 1945. So that by the end of that 30-year period, Europe was no longer the geopolitical center of the world, and into the heart of Europe had come the two new superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, and had divided Europe with what you see on the map there, the Iron Curtain, running right the way down the center of the continent, with American troops up to the edge on one side and Russian troops on the other. So Europe was no longer the geopolitical center of the world, but it was still the central theater of geopolitics, right? So we had, if we're talking orders, essentially a bipolar world. Obviously, there were other players, of which China was one, but in the perception of the time, it was essentially a bipolar world. Europe was the divided center of a divided world. Germany, Europe's central power, was the divided center of a divided Europe. And Berlin, which you see there, was the divided center of a divided Germany, in a divided Europe, in a divided world. So that to live in Berlin at that time was to be at the epicenter of a global competition in a bipolar world.